She saw my ancient mark. Then the alien girl fell to her knees. I never thought a tattoo could change my life. I got it on a Tuesday afternoon in Auckland, 4 years ago, sitting in a small shop that smelled like green tea and machine oil. The artist was an old man who never spoke much. He just looked at the design I picked from his wall, nodded slowly, and got to work. 3 hours later, I walked out with dark knotwork spiraling from my left wrist all the way up to my shoulder. Interlocked loops, a serpent eating its own tail, 7-pointed nodes connecting everything like stars on a map. It looked ancient. I just thought it looked cool. My name is Dale Morrow. I am 34 years old, a retired peacekeeping sergeant, and for the past 8 months, I have served as a human liaison officer aboard the Galactic Concordance research vessel, Athena's Reach. In simple terms, that means I am the only human on a ship full of aliens, and my job is to make sure both sides stay polite to each other. Most days, I feel less like a diplomat and more like a pet that learned to use a fork. The crew is not cruel about it, they are just honest. Humans are new to the Concordance. 40 years of membership, out of a civilization that spans thousands of worlds and millions of years of shared history. We are children at a table built for adults, and everyone knows it. I had made peace with that. I ate my meals alone, completed my reports on time, kept my opinions quiet, and reminded myself that being the least impressive person in the room was still better than the alternative, which was floating alone in space on a planet that had not yet figured out faster-than-light travel. Then came the morning in the medical bay. It was a routine scan. The ship's medical officer, a young Solvari woman named Vale, was running quarterly health checks on all crew members. The Solvari are tall and slender, with skin that shifts color the way water shifts light. When they are calm, they glow a faint silver blue. When they are happy, they turn soft gold. When they are afraid, they go white, almost translucent. I had spoken to Vale maybe a dozen times before that morning. She was quiet, professional, always slightly formal with me, in the way that told me she was not sure how to read human behavior. She asked me to remove my jacket for the upper body scan. I did, my sleeve rolled up with it. I watched her face first, because I was looking at her instrument panel, and she was in my line of sight. I saw her fingers stop moving. I saw her eyes drop to my arm and stay there. And then something happened that I had never seen from a Solvari before. The color drained out of her skin completely, pure white. Then, in a slow wave from her neck down to her hands, the white turned deep violet, the color they carry in moments of overwhelming emotion, grief or awe, or shock so strong it has no other name. She stepped back from the scanner table. Her legs seemed to stop working properly, and then, before I could say a single word, she went down on one knee, her head bowed, her hands pressed flat against her thighs. She was shaking. I sat up straight. "Vale, are you all right?" She said something in Solvari. The universal translator clipped to my collar hummed for a second, processing the old dialect. Then it spoke in my ear in a flat, mechanical voice that could not possibly carry the weight of what she had actually said. "The bearer of the unbroken spiral is among us." I looked at my arm. I looked at her. I said the only thing my brain could produce in that moment. "I think there's been some kind of mistake." She did not move. She did not look up. She stayed on her knee like she was waiting for something, and I had absolutely no idea what to do. Word on a starship travels faster than people admit. Within the hour, I had a quiet crowd gathered near the medical bay entrance. 6 Solvari crew members had found reasons to walk past the doorway. Each one who saw my arm reacted the same way Vale had, with that sudden draining of color, that sharp intake of breath, that instinctive drop of the head. 2 of them actually knelt in the corridor before their colleagues pulled them back to standing. The other species on board were confused. The Kreth, a militant insectoid people who wore their body armor even at dinner, watched the whole thing with open skepticism. The Yanari, ancient and gray and scholarly, said nothing at all. Their silence, I would later learn, was more meaningful than anyone else's words. Captain Orin Thess was Yanari. She was 312 years old, which put her roughly in middle age for her species, and she had the particular kind of calm that only comes from having seen too much to be easily surprised. She came to find me herself, which was unusual. She asked me to follow her to her quarters. I followed. She sat across from me and looked at my arm for a long time without speaking. Then she pulled up something on her desk terminal, an old document, the kind that has been copied and translated so many times that the original language is almost unrecognizable. She told me about the Solvari Codex of the Unbroken. It was their oldest text, older than their written language, preserved first in oral tradition, and then carved into stone, and the stone into crystal, and the crystal into digital record. It described, in symbolic language, a being from a world that was said to burn and freeze, bleed and heal, tear apart and rebuild without end. A world of impossible contradictions that somehow kept producing life. That being, the Codex said, would one day appear among the stars carrying the spiral of continuance on their body, and their arrival would mean that the old circle had not been broken. Captain Orenthes looked at me over the top of her terminal. The Solvari have been waiting 11,000 years, she said, for someone wearing your tattoo. I went back to my quarters, and I did what any rational human being does when confronted with something they cannot immediately understand. I researched. I pulled up every anthropological database I had access to. Celtic knotwork, dating back to at least 600 BCE, full of interlocked spirals and serpent loops. Maori, Ta, Moko, the traditional skin art of my own distant ancestors, built on curved lines and spiraling forms. Carvings at Newgrange in Ireland, made 5,000 years ago, older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids, covered in triple spirals. Patterns from the Indus Valley, engravings from Göbekli Tepe, drawings on cave walls in southern France. The same shapes, repeating, across cultures that had never spoken to each other, spread across every continent on Earth, spanning 10,000 years. Humans had been drawing this pattern since before recorded history. Nobody had ever been able to agree on why. Scholars called it a coincidence of instinct, the natural result of a hand moving in a pleasing curve. Something the brain finds satisfying without being taught to find it satisfying. I sat with that information for a long time. Then the Yanari archives came back with something else. Captain Orenthes had filed a query with the Concordance Historical Division, and the response arrived the same night. Buried in a sealed section of ancient records was a file on a species called the Vorath. They had been a spacefaring civilization of enormous reach, explorers and philosophers and artists, active in this region of the galaxy approximately 12,000 years ago. They were extinct now. No one knew exactly what had ended them. What remained were fragments, traces, small signs left on worlds they had visited. The Vorath had a habit of leaving marks on developing civilizations. Not technology, not knowledge, not language, just a symbol. A spiral interlocked with a serpent and 7 nodes. Their signature, their way of reaching forward through time to civilizations that did not yet exist. Both Earth and the Solvari homeworld had been visited by the Vorath. Both had received the mark. The Solvari had known what it was, and kept it sacred. Humans had received it, forgotten the source entirely, and kept drawing it anyway, for 10,000 years, in mud and clay and ink and stone, without ever knowing why. We had held on to it through every collapse, every dark age, every fire that burned a library to ash. Someone always remembered the shape. Someone always drew it again. Vale came to find me that evening. She was calmer now, her skin a steady pale blue, the color of a Solvari who was thinking carefully about what to say. She told me she was not embarrassed by what had happened in the medical bay. She told me that for her people, that moment was the most significant thing that had occurred in living memory, and that kneeling was the only response her body had known to offer. She sat across from me and placed a small carved object on the table between us. Bone, old and yellowed, shaped into a flat disc. The spiral was carved into its face. Her grandmother had given it to her. Her grandmother's grandmother had given it before that. Back and back, mother to daughter, 11,000 years of hands, passing the same shape forward, each one telling the next, "Keep this safe. We do not know for whom, but keep it safe." I showed her my datapad, Newgrange, the spiral triple carved above the entrance to a 5,000-year-old tomb in Ireland, a Maori pattern from a meeting house in New Zealand, a Celtic brooch found in Scotland, made 2,000 years ago, a wall carving from Turkey, 10,000 years old. She looked at each image without speaking. Her skin shifted slowly to gold. We thought we were keeping it safe for the Vorath, she said finally. We did not know we were keeping it safe for you. I did not have a grand answer for that. I am not a philosopher or a diplomat by nature. I am a retired sergeant from Auckland who joined the Concordance because the pay was decent and space seemed like a better option than another tour on the ground. So I said the only thing that felt true. Maybe both, I told her. She smiled. It was the first time I had seen a Solvari smile without any formality in it, just a real, quiet, warm smile. Her skin stayed gold for a long time after that. The last piece came 3 days later, in the common area, in front of half the crew. The Kreth commander, Garak, had been openly dismissive through the whole affair. He was not cruel about it, but he was clear. Superstition was not something the Kreth respected. The idea that a pattern on a young human's arm carried any cosmic meaning struck him as exactly the kind of magical thinking that kept underdeveloped species from contributing meaningfully to the Concordance. He said as much, in the common area, in front of everyone. He looked at me and asked, plainly, what humans had actually done to deserve any reverence at all. I did not get angry. I had been angry about smaller things in my life, and it had never helped. I pulled up my datapad instead. I walked him through 10,000 years, not the wars, not the plagues, not the famines and collapses, and dark centuries when civilization forgot how to write. I walked him through the pattern underneath all of it. Every time a human city fell, survivors carried the stories into the hills and told them to their children. Every time a library burned, someone had already memorized the books. Every time a people were scattered to the corners of a continent or a planet, they took their songs with them. They rebuilt. Not because someone told them to, not because a codex said they must. They rebuilt because something in them would not stop moving forward. The Vorath left a symbol on our world 12,000 years ago. We lost their name. We lost their language. We lost everything about them except the shape of one idea. And we held on to that shape, alone, without knowing why, through every collapse and every fire. And we carried it all the way out into the stars. That is what the mark meant, not the ink on my arm, the behavior behind it, the stubborn, unreasonable, deeply human refusal to let a good thing disappear. Garak was quiet for a long moment. The common area was completely silent. Then he did something that 3 Ynnari crew members later told me they had never seen a Kreth do to a human in 40 years of Concordance membership. He inclined his armored head, not low, not a bow of reverence, but an honest, deliberate acknowledgement. I went back to my quarters that night and stood in front of the small mirror above my desk for a while. I looked at my arm. The knotwork caught the light the same way it always had. The serpent looped back into itself, endless, the way it was designed to look. The 7 nodes sat where they had always been. I had picked that design because something in me had said yes, that one. Standing in a tattoo shop in Auckland, looking at a wall of art, some quiet instinct had reached up from a very deep place and made a choice I did not fully understand at the time. Maybe that is all it was, a man liking a pattern. Or maybe 10,000 years of human hands, passing one shape forward through every darkness they had ever survived, had finally arrived somewhere and recognized itself. I pulled my sleeve down. I had a shift in 4 hours. The stars outside my porthole were the same stars they had always been. Indifferent and enormous, and full of things nobody had named yet. The spiral goes on.